There's good evening. I will call to order the Wilsonville City Council meeting for December 16, 2019, last meeting of the year at 7:31 p.m. and request a roll call, please.
Councilor Linville. Council President Ackerval.
Here.
Councilor Lehan.
Here.
Mayor Knapp.
Here.
And Councilor West is excused.
Thank you. Would the audience please rise and join us in a pledge of allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, please the council, I would entertain a motion on order of agenda.
Your Honor, I move we approve the order of agenda.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Moved and second, we approve order of agenda. Copies are available to the public on the counter at the side of the room. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye, passes 4-0. Which brings us to first item up under communications, wherein we have presentation on Family Justice Center. Chief and associate there, please introduce yourselves.
Robert Werps here, Chief of Police for Wilsonville. I just wanted to take a moment to give you some information and the public in regards to the Family Justice Center. It's a really important service. There's been some significant changes. So without further ado, I'll introduce my friend and colleague, Lieutenant Michael Copenhaver. He's the director of the Family Justice Center.
Thank you all for having me. Again, as Chief said, my name is Michael Copenhaver, Lieutenant with the Clackamas County Sheriff's Office. And just a quick aside, I won't take too much of your time, but in 2004 through 2007, I served as a police officer here in the city of Wilsonville. It's kind of where I got my start, and just have great memories of being here, and thank the city for their continued support over the last 15, 16 years. And yeah, thank you. It's good to be back. This is one of my first trips back. So in pursuing 15 years, I found myself now the director of A Safe Place Family Justice Center in Oregon City. And so I just wanted to take a couple minutes and talk about the services available there. Essentially, a Family Justice Center, for those that don't know, is a one-stop shop for survivors of domestic violence, sexual violence, human trafficking, elder abuse, and stalking. So what studies have shown is the criminal justice system isn't really set up to help survivors of violence like we would hope and we would want. So it's complicated, confusing, it's scary, it takes a lot of time. You know, a survivor that is brutally assaulted over the weekend, let's say she has, you know, a job and kids. On Monday, she would need to make a police report. Tuesday would talk to the district attorney. Wednesday would maybe receive some housing assistance. Thursday wants to file a protection order. We can do that under one roof in one day. And so that's kind of the idea of a Family Justice Center, just wraparound services for those issues that I talked about. We're one of 130 Family Justice Centers in the United States. We're one of 35 that's affiliated by the Alliance for Hope out of San Diego, California. Those are standards that we have to meet, and it's a pretty big deal and pretty rigorous to be affiliated with them. 2013 is when we opened our doors. Had a lot of input from community, including nonprofit organizations, elected officials, and city and county departments. This was a really big deal for a bunch of community partners to kind of put their egos aside and do something for the greater good of citizens of Clackamas County. It was a joint venture between the Sheriff's Office, District Attorney's Office, Clackamas County, and Clackamas Women's Services, who's our largest nonprofit on site. Just a quick org chart of how we work. Again, it's a Sheriff's Office-led facility, and because of that, the Wilsonville Police Department has full access to the center. So I'll show you some pictures here in a little bit, but Wilsonville police officers do come and use our center, and we, again, provide that wraparound service for any victims of those crimes I talked about. The building's a former federal building that we pay $1 a year to the federal government to use. So it's, again, the cost isn't that big to be at this building. It suits our needs for now. We're kind of outgrowing the space, but we're lucky to have a building right on a bus line in Oregon City where we're able to serve a lot of people. We just celebrated our 6-year anniversary last week. and our numbers increase every single year. Again, we're up serving 5,500 people a year. We're going to be over that again this year. Our new participant visits keep rising, and people are lining up at our door every morning. Just a couple pictures of the center. You walk in and we have a receptionist. All of our artwork and color palette is intentional. We try to put people at ease. People a lot smarter than me have figured out which colors are kind of put you at ease and make you feel at home and comfortable. So we have kind of specific artwork and decorations throughout the center to try to have it not be an institutional feel. We want people wanting to be there. We want them to feel safe and wanting them to share their story to the extent that they're comfortable doing. We have a kitchen that any of our participants can use. We have people that will receive food stamp assistance and go out and get food, and they can make food in our kitchen while they wait. Food is comfort. We also, this picture doesn't depict it, but on the wall to the left of the photo, we now have racks set up where we get donations from the Sunshine Division up in Portland and the Oregon Food Bank. We get food donations for that. A child care room, a lot of people do come in with kids. And then these are interview rooms I was talking about. We have, this says 4, I think we now have 6 of them where you can come in and talk to an advocate or the police or DHS or one of our other on-site partners to receive services. So we feel that, reporting a crime in this atmosphere is going to be better for our survivors out there than having to go to a police station or walk through a metal detector or talking to someone at a courthouse. Again, we have computers, a bunch of public areas. These are computers that our survivors can use. Sometimes it's not safe in their own home to use their own computer to look for jobs or use their social media. And so we provide that safe outlet for them. And then probably the biggest service we provide is we have a video court we have the state court employees that work at our Family Justice Center, and we do every day at 1 o'clock, we have restraining order hearings to circuit court judges at the Clackamas County Circuit Court. So if a survivor needed a protection order down at the circuit court, they wouldn't necessarily receive advocacy services. They would have to have their children with them, wait in a long line, pay for parking. Here it's free parking. We have a room for their children. Everyone who enters our door has a one-on-one advocate assigned to them throughout not just the restraining order process, but any sort of safety planning or things later on. And then they can see a judge over the video court every day at 1 o'clock. So their abuser oftentimes doesn't know they're there, and they can get that through the privacy and security of our facility. And then I will go through some slides of just our partners. Again, the Sheriff's Office, we house our domestic violence enhanced response team, as well as 3 detectives assigned to investigate sexual assault cases involving adults that we've defined as 16 years and up. Clackamas Women's Services are our largest on-site partner, and they're a nonprofit, just wonderful people. The District Attorney's Office has 3 domestic violence and vulnerable adult prosecutors assigned there. El Programa Hispano is a culturally specific Spanish-speaking advocacy. We have DHS, both housing and food stamp assistance, as well as elder abuse investigators out of the Family Justice Center. We have abuse recovery ministry services, and both legal aid and victims' rights law center for low or no cost legal aid services for family matters that come up. H3S, or the Health, Housing, and Human Services with Clackamas County, is a large and founding partner. And then last but not least is Safety Compass, who provides, I just saw their brochure back there, but they provide advocacy services for survivors of human trafficking. So they're our newest partner, and they came on board about 2 months ago. So that is all I have for you in terms of PowerPoint. Just wanted a quick overview of our center, and just wanted to let you guys know it is available for you as residents of Clackamas County, and again, with your relationship with Wilsonville Police and the Sheriff's Office, any of those employees have full access to our center for any of those services or other things.
Wow. Questions, comments? Councilor Akkervall.
So the clients are generally referred by the police department, or how do people end up?
About 80% of our clients are referred either through DHS, like child welfare,
Okay.
or a police response.
Okay.
Oftentimes in the middle of the night, the sheriff's office or police department will go to a domestic violence case, but there's not quite enough to make an arrest based on the statute. But the police officers are smart enough to know something's going on, and so they'll refer services up here. And
I
then those
see.
services will happen. And what will often happen is these survivors will get hooked up with advocacy services and work with them for a period of time, and then get to a point where they're comfortable reporting more and more stuff to the police department about maybe some historical abuse that's happened.
So in the scenario that you just described, would they receive transportation to the facility then?
We have bus tickets that we can give out through Clackamas Women's Services, and I know CWS does provide some transportation services, but we will never let that be a barrier. I've never heard of some not being able to receive services because of transportation issues, and we're right on a bus line, right on the corner of Warner Milne and Beaver Creek.
Okay. Thank you so much. The presentation's great
Thank you.
to find out about all those resources that are available for the community members and
Wonderful.
working together like that.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I'll leave
thank
some
you.
brochures as well.
Thank you.
Councilor Linville.
Well, I just want to applaud you for the services that you're providing there. And just a question about referral out for temporary housing, and is that done through the center as well?
Yes, so both Clackamas Women's Services and the Department of Human Services through the state has a housing program. Clackamas Women's Services runs a confidential shelter here in the county, the largest in the state for survivors of domestic violence. And
So if a citizen comes in contact with someone that they think might benefit from those services, can they just say, hey, here's a number to call, or?
they absolutely can. So oftentimes we'll receive a call just at our main phone number from someone who's concerned, and we'll transfer that phone call to an advocate to kind of talk through what's going on, and then formulate a plan to reach out to someone maybe needing services.
Great. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, it's distressing to hear that almost 25,000 people needed services in the last year. It's very gratifying to know that you're there to provide those services. I wish that you weren't reporting that the need is still larger. So it looks like we've got work to do from several different standpoints in our society, but it's great to know that the services are now available. And how long has the operation been going on here?
6 years.
6 years now. Okay, I didn't think it'd been all that long. So thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Appreciate it. And we have a scheduled communication on wildlife monitoring. Mr. Rappold.
All right, good evening, Mayor and members of the council. I'm Kerry Rappold, the city's natural resources manager, and with me here tonight is Leslie Bliss Ketchum. And I've had the pleasure of working with Leslie since 2008 on wildlife monitoring, which is specific to our Beckman Road and Kinsman Road projects. Leslie has told me that actually this is one of the longest research projects of its type in the world. Banff has research that's gone on longer, but we're at that kind of level here in terms of research. So it's pretty unique. So I'm going to pass it over to Leslie. She has actually a doctorate in habitat connectivity through Portland State University. So she's very much an expert in this type of research, and she's done a lot of work related to it.
Thanks, Gary.
Yes.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to share what the last 11 years has brought out of this partnership and the monitoring that we've been able to do out at Beckman and Kinsman Roads. So I'm going to start with a little bit of a primer on road ecology as a topic, and starting with the fact that in the lower 48 states, the furthest you can possibly be from a road is only 20 miles. They're very ubiquitous. We know we use them for our own transportation needs, but they go far beyond that. And in fact, that area that is the furthest possible from a road is this point here on the map there, which is in the Two Oceans Plateau in Yellowstone National Park. It's estimated that 1/5 of the land area of the United States is ecologically impacted by roads, and that's because the impact of roads goes far beyond just that physical footprint where the asphalt is, but spreads beyond that. Apologize for Wilsonville being a little bit cut off there on the bottom, but this yellow outline here shows our urban growth boundary in the Portland metro area, and the red lines show the highway network there. And if you can imagine being a large bodied animal that maybe needs to move from one place to another, and if roads are a barrier to that, this could be a challenging landscape for you. But this is just the highways. And if we take the next step and throw the arterial roads on, the network becomes even more intense and even more challenging for maybe a given animal to move through. And there's one step further, and that's the neighborhood roads. So we can see that, again, it's just a very ubiquitous presence on the landscape for roads, and that interaction can be challenging for many species. I mentioned the ecological impact of roads goes beyond my field of study with wildlife, including air, water, and soil impacts, and various things there. But my area of study is the wildlife. And the main thing that we think of usually are the direct mortality from collisions. We've all seen roadkill, and I chose that picture because it's much easier to look at than any actual true-to-life picture. But also, some animals have avoidance behaviors to roads, so they actually won't even attempt to cross a road, and that can create this disruption in gene flow movement and habitat connectivity. And if that is extreme enough, or if the mortality from collisions is high enough, that can create local extinction. So it's a pretty big deal. But even if you're not particularly concerned about the wildlife, we are concerned about human impacts from collisions. And so some of the numbers from that are that per year in the United States, 1.5 million deer collisions occur, generating $8.3 billion in damages and over 200 deaths. So it's a pretty big deal, and we have a reason to think about ways that we can help reduce those collisions on the landscape. So how do we go about doing that? One of the ways that we can mitigate for road mortality are by putting in passage structures on the landscape. And so some of the pictures here, you can see the person standing underneath the bridge. That's the Lava Butte, the Lavalands Visitor Center area outside of Bend on Highway 97. And they built some undercrossing structures to allow wildlife to pass under the road safely. The large structures you see in the other photo moving over the top, those are from Banff National Park. Those are very well-known wildlife crossing structures that allow wildlife to move across the top of the road. And then, of course, the last picture there is from Beckman. And these crossing structures are usually paired with fencing that helps funnel those animals to those culverts and bridges. I got my start here. Carrie gave a presentation in a road ecology class that I was taking as a senior in my undergrad work at Portland State. And that sparked a big interest for me as I was about to start graduate school. And so I came out on a field trip in 2008, shortly before that crossing structure or that project was finished, and decided to work together and start monitoring that. So that is some of the early work that we were able to do out there. And it's such a fantastic project. The city and you all went well above and beyond what you needed to do as far as the mitigation, and really made this a project that could stand out as being ecologically sensitive. And it's definitely, over and again, something to be proud of. So all these different types of crossing structures provided us a unique opportunity to study how wildlife would choose to use these different designs. At the time, there was not a lot of information about how species would make those kinds of choices, so we had that opportunity. And also the prevention fencing that allowed to move animals to those crossing structures was also really, really fantastic. So we also used some interesting methods. We used a lot of motion detect cameras on the landscape that took great photos, but we also used sand tracking methods. And the sand tracking is really great because it picks up really, really good detail. And some of the pictures here show a snake track in the middle of some birds there at the top. We also see a mama duck with her ducklings walking through. And in the larger picture, you can see raccoons. There's a deer mouse track on there, a deer track, and even a slug slime trail. Not that we count the slugs, but, so really, really great data and great information. And we've been collecting that data in the summer seasons consistently for the last 11 years. Here's a sample of some of the wildlife we've been able to document out there at Beckman Road. So a whole host of native amphibians and reptiles, a whole bunch of different mammals, and we've documented also certain wetland birds. So some of the really cool, unique, some of the weasel family, we've got mink and short-tailed weasel, kind of your standard players with lots of deer out there, but also red-legged frogs and long-toed salamanders. And red-legged frogs are actually a strategy species in the state of Oregon. So very, very awesome to see them out there. So I'm going to kind of quickly breeze through some of the varied different projects that we've been able to do out there. So one is we tested for road avoidance behavior. We have a publication on some of that in Ecosphere on how animals respond to whether or not they even approach the road, some of those behavioral responses. So we were able to do some of that work at Wilsonville. We also did a small mammal mark recapture study looking at the response to the road network with small mammals. We did some honors undergrad projects looking at reptile and amphibian response to road presence, and one of the sites that we were able to work in was also in Wilsonville. We were able to look at how the addition of a dry passage option increased use of a crossing structure. So one of those box culverts had standing water in them year round, and after they added some logs to provide a dry passage, we found that the use of that structure doubled. We had twice as many species and much more activity. So it was really excellent addition to the literature. Also, one of the chapters of my dissertation is actually on the wildlife response to the presence of artificial light. So we were able to add artificial light and experimentally remove and add different levels of light to this structure. And it may be a little bit different. I haven't checked the literature lately, but at the time of this being published, this was the first study of how terrestrial vertebrates respond to artificial light. And we did find a response in nocturnal animals. So really good information for us to have as we plan for our infrastructure, especially adjacent to natural areas. Also, we've been able to do some work out at the Kinsman Road project. So we were able to get some really good pre-construction data on what wildlife were present and how they were using the landscape. And we've been able to follow up with that with a year of monitoring after the road has been constructed and what animals we've been able to see using those passage structures as well. And then, as I mentioned, the long-term monitoring. 11 years and going strong of data is no small thing. And we're exploring different ways that we might analyze that to put it into a package. But there's some really great storytelling that we can do with the data we have right now with how things have shifted. You can see the picture here of the site right before the road opened is dramatically different than what it looks like now. So a lot of changes in habitat as well as changes in traffic volume over time that we can look at in comparison. And last but not least, I want to mention the educational opportunities. I have been fortunate to be able to bring out many different classes from Portland State, as well as K through 12 students. I've gotten volunteer help in monitoring those sand tracking and provide educational opportunities about all throughout those different things. So it's been a real value, I think, in spreading information about how we can use this infrastructure to support wildlife in the long term. So overall, these structures have provided a great benefit to wildlife, lots of research and learning opportunities, and really enhanced the understanding of wildlife and road interactions and design considerations for specific species. And last but not least, we want to make this investment count. And it's always important to remember, what are we connecting these wildlife to with these crossing structures? Connectivity is critical, and thinking about how we preserve these places that are on either side of the road and what they connect to beyond that, I think is a really important thing to consider. So thank you for your time. And I have a few just fun pictures at the end here of things that we've collected over time, just really nice photos of deer here. We have this great blue heron. Of course, all the Bambis are adorable. This is an American bittern, really beautiful picture right next to the road. This is a mink coming out of one of the crossing structures. We have this buck here, again, right next to the road, doing his thing. Coyote, raccoon. They always get curious about the cameras, so they stand up. And then this is a series of photos. You catch these unique moments sometimes out there. So this is a vole. This is on that log that we were monitoring the dry crossing structure. And so the vole this is kind of every photo, and then a mink shows up. Oh, my. And comes right back and shows us its prize, and then heads off to have lunch. So thank you for your time.
Well, remarkable. What is the future going to be? Does the monitoring need to continue? Are there stories that we have yet to document or activity that we need to show how to accommodate, or what are you thinking?
Leslie, and I can chime in if you go ahead.
Sure. Well, one thing I can say is that the system doesn't stand still. And what we've been able to see so far is that we've seen shifts in the community of species that have used that area, and we're also continuing to see change. Also, the surrounding landscape continues to change, and all of that contributes to the types of animals that are present and how active they are within those crossing structures. So it's an evolving landscape.
And we had a structure that we installed with Kinsman Road that was very different in some respects from Beckman Road in that it has a shelf within the structure, because what's the height in there? Probably about 6 feet.
Mm-hmm.
And so that shelf has a tube that allows like rodents and other small creatures to come up through there. And so I think you're just starting some of that research, right, with the use of that.
Yeah, being able to compare how it provides that dry passage, and it is, there's the comfortability factor for certain wildlife. They may feel uncomfortable being exposed, especially those little guys that are typically food for everything else, like that vole, the unfortunate vole. So if they have structure or some other small thing to move through that keeps them safe, they may be more likely to utilize those structures, so.
And I want to thank Leslie too, because as we were starting the design work for Kinsman Road, she actually provided input in terms of the structures and what we were, planning to do. And we found it really, important to include her input into the design.
It brings to mind the upcoming discussion about the Beckman Dip Bridge along Beckman Creek and what the challenges might be there, because it seems pretty obvious it's a wildlife corridor.
Yes. A very important one, yeah, as we all know. So we're certainly making some considerations at this point in terms of what that project should look like and how we take into account what's there, whether it's the aquatic, life or the terrestrial, and how do we improve that condition or situation there.
Yeah. Councilor Lehan.
Well, that's kind of what I was going to say. It seems like, it's good to have the ongoing research, but it seems like we have enough research to know that we need to do this on wildlife corridors. And certainly Beckman is our biggest one within the city, and involves Beckman Road and Wilsonville Road crossings as the major ones. But then there's also, there's Coffee Creek all the way down.
Right.
So I know they made improvements to the Wilsonville Road crossing, because all of that water there is headed down to Wilsonville Road. So, and it's part of they're all to connect to the Willamette River. So that's where the movement's going back and forth, north and south too, in both those corridors, as well as the Arrowhead Creek corridor, which also crosses under Wilsonville Road. So it seems like we need to start applying some of these things pretty aggressively when we're in the middle of projects. I know the one at Wilsonville Road is one that, are we doing any monitoring of that one?
No, the only specific monitoring like this is at Beckman and Kinsman, but I agree with you that, yeah, we should be using.
Because that was a huge project. Remember, Coffee Creek used to come under Wilsonville Road there at the storage place in a culvert. And we tore that whole road up and put in a great big bridge structure under there. And, but then we haven't done anything to monitor that. But these would, a lot of these animals, that's how they're getting to the river.
Yeah.
That's their corridor. So we don't need it's frustrating to protect them only at the one crossing and not the other two crossings that are keeping them from the Willamette. So anyway, that would be my priority, would be the one at Wilsonville Road is a logical extension. We have already done a major improvement on that culvert, but would be to see, and especially if you mark, if you have creatures that are marked, to see which ones are traveling between the Beckman Road crossing and the Wilsonville Road crossing.
And this is just one example. I've told Leslie about this, but, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's okay. But the other, the tough part about that crossing, of course, is how it necks down to that narrow canal on the north side of Wilsonville Road between apartments and the storage unit thing.
Yeah.
So I don't know if larger mammals are making some other route to get across Wilsonville Road and the smaller ones are going under there or what, but it would be interesting to know because they don't just exist up there wandering around Beckman Road. They're moving all the way up to Graham's Ferry and all the way down to the Willamette.
Well, this is just one example, but years ago, Leslie on one of her cameras captured a bobcat. And about a year ago, when I was down at the ODOT storage yard adjacent to I-5 and by the I-5 undercrossing trail, I saw a bobcat down there. I was within probably 25 yards of it. And then I started talking to some people along the river, and they said, yeah, that bobcat moves up and down the river. So it could have been a possibility that bobcat was up at Beckman Road at some point. And so I think there is a corridor there still that, is.
I had one other question, which isn't exactly about road crossings, but about that area, and that is with the deep canals there. Do you monitor for, I didn't know if you were intentionally not putting pictures of invasive species, but bullfrogs have been just an enormous problem up there. I don't know how you could possibly have red-legged frogs showing up there because the bullfrogs are so ubiquitous and they are enormous, huge.
Right.
And nutria, that's the other thing, in those deep canals are full of nutria and bullfrogs, and I don't know if there's any way to address that or is there any monitoring going on?
Yeah.
I'll let you address that. Yeah.
That's a tough one because bullfrogs are ubiquitous. And when you have connected waterways.
Well, they're deep water.
Yes, and they're just going
out
to
of
keep
there.
coming in from outside areas, even if you were able to get rid of them locally. But they definitely are out there. We are monitoring mostly with sand tracks, so we're not monitoring a lot of the more aquatic species, but we do see plenty of nutria, and we do see plenty of bullfrogs. But yeah, thankfully so far, we've had coexistence and had those red-legged frogs and also long-toed salamanders and newts and other aquatic species that have been able to persist. Speaking of some of those ideas of these connected corridors and these different locations, I will also mention that I've been working with Metro in developing a habitat connectivity toolkit where we go out and try to assess the on-the-ground condition of connectivity in different areas. And one of our pilot areas was connecting the Willamette River up through Coffee Lake Creek up to the Tualatin River Refuge. And so thinking back to what we looked at in some of those culverts and where we saw deer tracks moving through, and a lot of culverts that maybe weren't originally purpose-built for wildlife, if they're big enough, then they can successfully pass, and it's a matter of determining which ones.
Well, and looking for opportunities, and when you're talking about an area as big as the Willamette River to the Tualatin Refuge, there are a lot of road projects that are going on continually that ought to be being evaluated, each one for, and I don't know about the big pipe, but ought to be being evaluated for wildlife impacts or how we could improve them in the midst of an existing road project. Would be good. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
Councilor Akkerwall.
I just want to say thank you. This was a fabulous presentation, and the pictures. I hear from our community members that one of the reasons a lot of families and individuals choose to live in Wilsonville is because they want to have close proximity to wildlife and in fact share spaces. And this, appears to be one way that we are trying to work that out. One question that I recently heard, and I wonder if it was maybe in response to the article that was in Boone's Ferry Messenger recently too about this, but if there is a live webcam that people could watch to also be aware of some of the things that are, some of the images that, you were able to share with us tonight. And I don't know if that's out there somewhere, but people are asking for the URL if it exists. Yeah.
I have not actually seen one on a crossing structure. You see them in the salmon streams with the bear or on nests and that kind
Right.
of thing. But yeah, that's a novel idea I haven't heard of before. That would be pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Let's do that.
Well, interesting topic. It just reminds me, I saw on public television here just a couple days ago about wildlife in urban areas around the world and how much it is happening and how adaptable so many species seem to be. But really the kind of heart-stopping one, and can't tell you the country it was in, was the hippopotami that come up out of the river and graze on everybody's lawn in the dark, 1,000-pound animals, keep the grass really well mowed, and then they go back to the river and everybody's fine because they've just learned that this is how it works and the routes are available. But you don't want to get between the animal and where they want to go. So we don't have quite that. But, clearly lots of species here, and I am sure there is more that we can figure out how to do appropriately, and figuring out what those steps might be and those priorities are some of the lessons we might be able to draw from your research. And I hope, Carrie, that you're pondering those questions as we continue to have construction going on and become more aware of some of the barriers that might already be here. So.
Definitely. Yeah. No, we're taking those into consideration all the time.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. That will then bring us to our citizens input and community announcements section, which is an opportunity for visitors to address council on things not on the agenda. Also a time to address things that are on the agenda but not scheduled for public hearing. Staff and the city will make every effort to respond to any questions raised during this portion, either before tonight's meeting ends or as soon as we can thereafter. We do request people hold their comments to a couple, 3 minutes. I do not have any speaker cards tonight. Is there anyone that would like to speak at this portion? And I'm seeing no waving hands, so I will move on then to mayor's business, where I've got a couple of items scheduled. The first of which is the city attorney's annual contract. The council employs the city manager and the city attorney, and we need to do their contract renewals annually. The council has had an opportunity to participate in a input survey online, and that information has been collated by HR and provided back to the council. I have to say, for members of the public, it was one of the most stellar appraisal polls that I've ever seen. Very high appreciation of the work the city attorney has done. Council has also benefited from a synopsis of all the legal work that the legal department has done under the city attorney's leadership in the past year. And it's quite sobering to stop and to page through all that information. It's hard to remember how many different pieces of legal guidance and document preparation and negotiation and occasionally actual litigation that arise in the conduct of a city the size of Wilsonville. But we have benefited over a period of time by very professional, very thoughtful and well-considered guidance by our legal department and by Ms. Jacobson. So I wanted to publicly state that and ask the council if there's anything that you would like to add publicly here at this point with regard to the annual consideration of our legal representation. Councilor Akkervall.
Well, I would like to make a motion, but would you like to have comments at this time?
Well, we could actually follow Roberts and have a motion before we have discussion, if you would like to
Then
do so.
I'd like to move to approve the extension of Ms. Jacobson's contract as city attorney from June 20th, 2019 to June 19th, 2021, as outlined in the employment agreement, with an increase to base compensation of 4.5% beginning December 1st, 2019 through November 30th, 2020, and an increase to base compensation of 4% beginning December 1st, 2020 through November 30th, 2021.
Thank you. Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Would you like to have some discussion?
Sure, I would agree with your prior comments and express my appreciation for the work that our city attorney has done on behalf of the city. We have very high expertise on our staff, and Barbara Jacobson's, what she brings to her role here is no exception to that. In fact, the professionalism and the experience that she brings to her role serves the city well. So I'd like to thank her for that.
Thank you. Councilor Linville.
Yeah, I'd like to echo Councilor Akkervall's thoughts in terms of how fortunate the city is to have the expertise, the level of expertise that we have with a city attorney that has both public and private experience. And that in many other government situations, the legal services are actually contracted out. So cities actually pay additionally for attorney services that their city attorney is either not qualified or doesn't feel qualified to manage. We are very fortunate that we are able to handle the business of the city legal issues for the most part in-house, and that is to your speaks to your expertise. And so thank you for what you do for us. And it's not just with the assistance on with the city council and other matters that pertain directly to the mayor's office, but Ms. Jacobson also provides advice to our commissions, boards, our development review boards, planning commission, some of the other boards as well. So busy job. So thank you for your service.
Yes, I would concur with everything that's been said, and just as I said in work session, I think we have a city attorney who is hard to intimidate, and she holds her own with on legal affairs throughout the region and the state, and so we're fortunate to have her on our side.
I would certainly agree with everything I've heard also, and just remind the public that a city the size of Wilsonville, not huge, but we're involved in many different venues, relationships with public and private entities around us, and sometimes those lead to legal needs. I think that we have an admirable track record with regard to handling of that business. The fact that we're a growing city means that we continue to have issues that perhaps more mature cities would not be dealing with, and I'm thinking primarily of development agreements with different private sector entities, with contractors that are conducting certain operations around us, and that sort of thing. It's important that we continue that work and that we be on top of it and be making responsible, careful judgments as we go forward. And I am confident that Ms. Jacobson's leadership would enable us to do that for the coming couple of years. So I heartily endorse the idea that we do extend the contract on a 2-year basis, which has been our habit here the last few years. Is there anything you would like to say publicly, Ms. Jacobson?
Well, I just want to thank you all for your kind words and for your support. It's a wonderful city to work for, and I have a fabulous client, so I feel very fortunate.
All right, if there is nothing further for comment, we have a motion to approve the contract for 2 years with the stated compensation increases. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye, passes 4-0. Guess we got you for another couple years, so look
Yay
forward
for
to
me.
that.
Thank you.
Thank you, one and all, and thank you, Ms. Jacobson, for the work that you do.
Thank you, Mayor.
Another piece of mayor's business here is activity reporting. You would think that with the holidays almost upon us, things would be slowing down, but does not seem like it. So today I had the opportunity, as I have for the last some years, to attend the Oregon Business Plan Leadership Summit downtown, where there were panel discussions and talks by a variety of different people, including Governor Kate Brown, both Senators Merkley and Wyden, House Minority Leader Christine Drazen, who has been here recently, spoke and conducted herself very nice and had some good points to make. So I think that was very interesting. One of the small facts that seemed to emerge was the extent to which our economic performance, as well as our ability to deal with the challenges of housing and transportation in some cases, seem to be related in a lot of ways to the educational levels in our society. It was pointed out that right now in our educational system, some 60% of the children enrolled in educational institutions across the state come from minority ethnic backgrounds. So the scope of our diversity within our communities is not only going to change, it's already changed in a lot of ways, and finding ways to be sure that we engage with some of those communities that are growing in influence and in numbers is an important piece of how we look at our economic future, at our society's future, at our communities' futures, and I thought that was a fairly astute observation. I was able also to attend by invitation the Charbonneau Country Club Homeowners Association, along with Councilor Linville here recently. We were invited to talk some about the Aurora Airport questions that are under review at this point, and the board wanted to understand the city's position with regard to current activity, and we tried to describe that accurately, and the board actually voted very strongly to endorse the city's legal appeal, and also then further to actually oppose the expansion of the airport runway at Aurora on behalf of the Homeowners Association there. So that was a very interesting meeting. Clackamas County Coordinating Committee met since the last council meeting and had a review of the county's housing needs analysis, which has been underway for a period of time. Quite a bit of interesting data presented. Hopefully will provide some context and information to our Affordable Housing Task Force that's meeting. One of the points they made were the number of housing sites unbuilt in each different city around the area. Now, they had not captured our Frog Pond expansion within that, so Wilsonville looked a little bit short of housing growth areas, and actually it was quite a bit larger when you look at the fact that Frog Pond has been brought in to our residential expansion area. It is a concern that some of the Clackamas County cities have little additional housing area to grow into, and some are not particularly oriented toward doing housing growth. And so you get the question of what are each city's responsibilities as far as the housing situation that we collectively find ourselves in, which is something that the county and the people working on this are going to have to work on and figure out where that goes. We also talked about the upcoming 2020 legislative short session, and the coordinating committee decided that the county push should be focused almost entirely on the question of the Interstate 205 proposed improvements, including the Abernathy Bridge expansion. That is the addition of a third lane from Stafford Road around all the way to Oregon City to eliminate that bottleneck area. The Metropolitan Mayors Consortium met and also talked about their 2020 legislative agenda for the short session upcoming, had a lot of good discussion. The Greater Portland, Inc. Small Cities Consortium met and had a great report about the business recruitments that group has done through the year and what the trends are in that recruitment. One of the interesting things is that the focal point for most out-of-state recruitment seems to be for facilities on the order of 20 acres or so, not the huge multi-hundred acre sites that a few years ago were being touted as the prime need. So the data that they are collecting as they go along is very interesting and should help guide us on our economic development ideas. I have, through this past year, represented the Small Cities Consortium to the Greater Portland, Inc. Board of Directors, and they've asked me if I would want to continue. I said I would be willing unless there was somebody who would really like to step in and get started. So we'll see how that goes for the coming year. I sit on the Metro Transportation 2020 Funding Measure Task Force. The discussion is really kind of getting down to the final negotiations on which corridors should be prioritized for that proposed funding measure. In fact, the vote on which of those corridors to prioritize is upcoming this week, and we will see how that goes. Clackamas County is still in the mix with the Highway 99E and McLaughlin corridor, what they call the Clackamas to Columbia corridor, which is the Sunrise Highway going east off the 205 and then joining up to 181st Avenue, which then runs north all the way up to the Columbia River, essentially, at least to I-84. Also, there is the Tualatin Valley Highway, 185th Southwest, 82nd Avenue Southeast, Burnside Avenue all the way across the river through the middle of Portland.
I think we need a map.
And the Southwest Corridor Light Rail that would be proposed to come all the way out to Bridgeport. So there's lots of projects in that mix. Attended the West Side Economic Alliance breakfast meeting this past month. I think some of you were there. We're Councilor Linville, did you attend that? And there was a panel discussion by a variety of women involved in economic development in different capacities, looking at what their observations and lessons are on current and changing trends, which was real interesting to listen to. I've also conducted interviews with 12 citizens interested in boards and commission appointments, so I've got to parse those down and come back to you with some recommendations here shortly. Upcoming is the Clackamas County Coordinating Committee Metro Subcommittee, which meets on metro transportation measures. That'll be this week, as well as the JPAC, Joint Policy Advisory Committee on Transportation for Metro. There is some discussion of a program that ODOT is calling CBOS 2. Don't ask me what that stands for. Anyway, corridor or something or other. It's the whole project that you've seen underway the last few years, where they have done these short connector pieces from ramp to ramp on some of the fairly close spaced freeway exits and entrances. And the South I-5 piece from 205 all the way down across the river to the exits just south of us are on their CBOS 2. They're currently planning on looking at the needs on those different pieces and prioritizing which ones to do. So there's an interesting piece that may involve Wilsonville in that mix as we get a little further along. As I say, there's hardly anything going on because it's a holiday season. I would invite the council to give us their reports if you would like. Council President Akkervall.
Sure. This last few weeks, let's see, I attended Chamber's annual meeting, and along with Councilor Linville, one of the agenda items during that meeting was the opportunity to recognize some of our important volunteers in Wilsonville community. And so that was nice to be able to be there for that too, last Wednesday. And also attended the staff holiday party this last Friday. That's a nice event, and it's nice to be able to connect with a lot of the staff that work at the city, but also try to express some thanks of all of the excellent work that they do week after week all throughout the year. So I want to reiterate that again because it's very sincerely felt. And then I wanted to point out two things. Since this is our last meeting of the calendar year, people may be in a mindset for some reflection on the year and thinking about next year, perhaps setting New Year resolutions. I saw two things recently that I wanted to draw attention to. One of them is, I believe it's in our Parks and Rec activity flyer, the latest packet that we got in the mail about that. And there is a emergency preparedness event that's happening January 18th. Specifically for seniors, I believe. And there's limited spots, so I understand people need to sign up in advance, but I thought that was of great interest, and participants get a Go Pack as part of their participation with that event. And the other is, I think, a continuation of a program that's been underway, but SMART has been doing, I know they've held at least one, but Learn to Bike workshops, specifically for primary and middle school students. And so there may be some people that New Year's resolution is to learn to bike or use their bike more often, I guess, in getting to school or around town. One of the things that we try to do as a city is to have that connectivity so it is an option for people. So I wanted to call out those workshops, and they are being held February through May. There's at least one each month during that time period, and they're held at the different primary and middle schools that we have in Wilsonville. So for the primary middle school students, but maybe a reminder to us all of how that might fit into plans for 2020.
Thank you very much. Councilor Lehan.
Yes, I would just remind people that the city offices will be closed on Christmas Day and New Year's Day. And what was the other one? And as well as the library. The library will close at 2 o'clock on Christmas Eve. So, so plan on getting your Christmas Eve things before 2 o'clock. That's all.
All right, thank you. Councilor Linville.
Well, I wanted to,
And Merry Christmas.
I wanted to thank the mayor for your time coming to meet with the Charbonneau Country Club Board. I think in all of these years, as I reminded the board, the city has done the heavy lifting on the issues around the impact of the airport and the land use issues for the exclusive farm use land that is south of Miley Road. And it was important for the Country Club Board to demonstrate its support for what the city has been doing and is doing currently. I wanted to remind folks again about the Community Enhancement Program and the applications. There's money that is going to be available for projects that start after July 1, 2020. Just encouraging community groups to put an application in. And if you're interested in that, the program information session, which will give you all the information you need about completing the application, what projects might be applicable to this program, that information session is at 5:30 this Thursday at the Wilsonville Library. And since this is the last meeting of the year, I wanted to remind everybody that get your reusable grocery bags ready, because come January 1st, you're going to probably in many stores be paying for the paper bags, but certainly will not get a plastic bag. So, and that'll become just a habit if it's not already one that people need to establish. And I just wanted to wish everyone a happy holiday and safe travels for everyone who is leaving the area. And for those of us that are staying, we want this nice, beautiful, sunny weather to continue for a while. So we don't want to have to break out the city's snow removal equipment. So have a great holiday.
Thank you very much. Okay, let's do a little bit of formal business if we could, starting with our consent agenda.
Resolution number 2778, a resolution of the City of Wilsonville authorizing the sole source selection of the National Research Center for the 2020 and 2022 National Citizen Survey. Resolution number 2781, a resolution of the City of Wilsonville acting in its capacity as a local contract review board, approving the bid process, accepting the proposal which will best serve the interest of the city, and awarding a contract to Green Sweep Asphalt Services, LLC, for the project known as Street Sweeping Services.
Thank you. Council, is there a motion on the consent as has
Your
been
Honor, I
read?
move to approve the consent agenda as read.
Thank you. A second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. We approve consent agenda as read. 2 items. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes 4-0. Thank you much. Bringing us to some new business items, starting with Resolution 2775.
Resolution number 2775, a resolution of the City of Wilsonville adopting the findings of the Solid Waste Collection Rate Report amended December 2019, creating new community recycling services and city street sweeping collection disposal services, and reducing the temporary recycling service surcharge rate.
Okay, staff, please.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. Mark Otnett, Public Government Affairs Director.
Amanda Guile-Hinman, Assistant City Attorney.
And we're pleased tonight to bring to you resolution number 2775 that basically reviews the solid waste franchise program and then makes various recommendations for how to respond. The rate review was conducted by the city's consultant, Chris Bell, a CPA with 20 years of experience in solid waste review issues. The purpose of the rate review is to see what the operating margin is for our franchisee Republic Services. There's various lines of business, residential and commercial industrial, of which there's both container and drop box services. The company made certain revenues, has certain allowable costs, producing franchise income that produces a margin, operating margin. The operating margin is to be in the 8 to 12% range. However, the first time that we conduct the solid waste review, we were aiming for 10% on the mark if we can. The current rate of return was about 15.1%. These are some various details that go into showing both the 2018 and the 2019 projected amounts. Here's another way of looking at it. For 2018, 15.1% return. 2019 is projected to be at 18.4 for this year. For 2020, assuming the status quo with no service or rate modifications, it would come in at 12.9. And if the council implements the staff recommendation for new recycling services, city street sweepings, and I'll go into that in a little more detail, and recycling surcharge rate reduction, it's possible to bring the rate of return down to exactly 10%. The temporary recycling surcharge, which was to be temporary when the market for recyclables collapsed, basically we had a little issue we found during the review where the Republic Services had implemented a methodology that Clackamas County had approved for the areas controlled by the county, but the city of Wilsonville's methodology was slightly different. This will result in a refund or credit of about $161,000 to Wilsonville businesses. We took a Let's Talk Wilsonville survey at the behest of council and found out that indeed residential food waste program, a styrofoam collection recycling program were very popular, and then followed by the idea of free bulky waste pickup for seniors and those with disabilities. So to reach the target operating margin, we looked at basically several options, rate reduction, which is the recycling surcharge, and then new service improvements, residential food waste program that would be allow residents to put food scraps in with their yard debris cart, bulky waste pickup for ADA and senior citizens. This would be a one-year program of approximately 240 pickups that would be offered. A styrofoam collection and recycling program for both residents and businesses, and this would be a prototype. We haven't done this before in our market, so Republic Services would set up a station at the WRI transfer facility. We would also then do a commercial industrial fluorescent tubes and batteries box mailback service. This would be funded through the program for approximately a certain number of boxes that have a cost, where businesses could basically get a box filled up with fluorescent tubes that contain mercury and then have free pickup and shipping for processing. Finally, but a commercial food waste program, which is a mandatory program throughout the metro region that the council has already adopted. We'll be rolling that out during the course of the year with the largest food scrap producers in the city participating. And then finally, a new option for Public Works street sweepings and leaf collection and disposal. So this would not be the service to actually sweep the streets. Rather, this would be a place for us to take the street sweepings, deposit them, and then have Republic Services take care of the final disposal. This would actually save the city some money. We'll go into a little more detail on all of these. And finally, the temporary recycling surcharge, a 50% across-the-board rate reduction. So residentials would be cut in half from $2.50 a month to $1.25. Commercial businesses, the same situation, plus they would be assessed the correct method of methodologies for invoicing. This would start January 1st. So a little more detail on the new service improvements. As we noted, the residential food waste program allows food scraps to be collected with the yard debris. Could start in Q2 of 2020. Bulky waste pickup, 250 pickups, each estimated at a cost of $40. Styrofoam collection and recycling, as we noted, a pilot program, and we'll see how it goes for the first year. The commercial industrial fluorescent tubes, batteries mailbox, very convenient service. We did it several years ago as a community enhancement program project. Businesses really liked it. They suggested instead of also doing tubes, let's do batteries. And so indeed we will add that. The commercial food waste program, as we noted, is scheduled to start in March of 2020 for the largest food producers, food scrap producers. And then finally, we're working with Republic Services to have arrangements for using the WRI facility for DEQ permitted street sweepings, where we would be able to take our street sweepings. This has an estimated cost of $75,000 in the first year. It would produce at least $100,000 in savings for the city budget. So quite a good program, and this was something that the city manager was very interested in. Here, in a nutshell, is a summary of the 6 new services with their estimated cost, and reduces the operating margin by 2.9 percentage points, helping us get to that 10% margin. Additionally, when you include the across-the-board recycling surcharge reduction, that reduces operating margin by 1.8 percentage points. Again, it gets us to that 10% operating margin target. So assuming that we do implement the city staff recommendations, we will bring Republic Services right exactly to the 10% target. That, in a nutshell, is a summary of resolution number 2775. We're here to answer any questions that you might like.
Thank you. So, Council, questions for staff with regard to any of the specifics on resolution 2775? Councilor Lehan.
I guess I could just look at you. It's getting late. What was I going to say, though? This seems like a very progressive sort of solid waste program. Are we ahead of the curve in terms of most other cities, or is Republic Services doing this like everywhere, or what? Are we out leading the way on this?
Well, Lake Oswego adopted the scraps, and Republic Services provides service to Lake Oswego. They did that about, I think, a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years, if I recall. But in terms of their territory, this would be unique for us. They serve Tualatin also. This is pretty unique. The Styrofoam collection station, both residents and businesses have indicated a high interest in this.
That would be great.
We have a large business community. I have a feeling that Tualatin businesses will probably be coming over too. Because WRI, Republic Services, serves them also. It's a great program. It's absolutely incredible that we're able to do this and still provide somewhat of a rate reduction for both our residents and businesses.
And I would add that I think a lot of this, why you don't see maybe all of these programs in other communities, is because we did go through the renegotiating the franchise agreements, where other communities haven't done that recently. And so there was some adjustments in what we do consider for costs and revenue, which led to this outcome. So I just don't think other communities have had that opportunity yet.
Well, and I'm also very pleased at the outreach to, find out which services people are most interested in, or businesses, or whichever. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Councilor Akable.
So if this plan is approved, I wonder what the education for these new programs might look like coming out.
It's a good question. So we've already started meeting with Republic Services to talk about this. This will be a multi-integrated effort depending on which program exactly. So for the residential outreach, it will be primarily through the Boones Ferry Messenger, but also inserts. Republic Services can do inserts in the bi-monthly residential bills. We'll do media releases, and so work with the spokesman to also get out information. Then in terms of the business outreach, by law, Metro is responsible for employment recycling programs, and they've delegated that responsibility to Clackamas County Sustainability. So we looked at Clackamas County Sustainability for outreach to businesses, for education, and they will be working with them, particularly on the commercial food scraps program, because that's such a big program, but we'll be working them also on the battery and tube collection program and the styrofoam to notify businesses. And this will be an excellent opportunity for our economic development manager when he makes calls on companies to, hi, I'm from the government. I'm actually here to give you something of, so.
Thank you.
Councilor Linville.
I'm wondering if Republic Services had indicated that they might be willing to do a little more education of our citizens on the residential food waste program and how people can do that without just dumping food waste into the big green bins and letting it sit for a week. Is there literature and some suggestions?
We can certainly work with them, and I will say Marion County has had this program for many years. One of the things you can do, for example, is you can freeze your food waste, and then when the week comes to have your service, just dump the frozen item into the yard debris. But we will be working with them on trying to educate the public. In fact, that's part of the reason we're having a delayed start for this program, is to ramp up the public education efforts and our coordination amongst the county, Republic Services, and the city staff.
Any other questions? If not, Council, what's your pleasure with regard to Resolution 2775?
I move to approve resolution number 2775.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. We approve Resolution 2775. Discussion?
Sure.
Councilor Akable.
I just wanted to say that I think, thank you for the presentation, and this has been the product of, several work session meetings and continued communication from all different ends. And I appreciate that staff and Republic Services have been able to work together to make this plan that I think involves a couple different tactics. Both the reduction in the recycling surcharge, so a monetary difference, but then also in the addition of these new services, and hopeful that will find a balance in things going forward. I think we know the landscape is always changing, and hopefully having these number of different tools now, we'll be able to continue to adapt as things evolve, and I think it's very exciting. So I'm happy that our community will be able to have all of these different services, but the careful, I think, research that, many people have done going into this work, into this resolution, the care to, I guess, give our community members ways to live intentionally, but also maintaining trust from our community members as far as what they're being charged for services. And I really appreciate the process and everyone's contribution to that process. So thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Linville.
I would agree that it is incumbent on the city to make sure that our contractors are living up to their obligations. So I appreciate that the review was done and that recommendations were made on how to get that profit margin down into our expectations for our contract. One of the things that I hear from citizens that I come into contact with is their concern about styrofoam and where it's going and how to get rid of it, and the concern of putting it in the garbage. And so I think that's going to be a really popular service, and especially with all of the deliveries that get made around the holidays. Nearly everything has styrofoam in it these days in those boxes that come to our doorstep. So I appreciate that that's going to be a good service for our community.
I certainly would reflect all the comments that I have heard. I also want to acknowledge that the relationship we have with Republic over the years has been a very high-quality relationship. I'm hopeful that that will continue. I know it's a little disquieting, this first audit of the new contract, where we kind of rubbed up against some differences one way or the other, but I am hopeful that Republic finds the outcome appropriate and will work in the future to continue to be a partner with the city in a way that is productive. So I want to thank them for that and look forward to an ongoing relationship that's beneficial on both sides, as well as for the work that the staff has done. Anything else anyone needs? If not, we have a motion, a second, to approve Resolution 2775. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, passes 4-0. Thank you very much. That will bring us to Resolution 2776.
Resolution number 2776, a resolution of the City of Wilsonville authorizing the city manager to execute a professional services agreement with J. Ray Ads and PR, Inc. for Explore Wilsonville Tourism Promotion and Development and Destination Marketing Services.
Good evening, Mayor, members of City Council, Mark Onden, Public Affairs Director again, and from solid waste to tourism. And so Resolution 2776 basically will enable us to acquire tourism promotion services to enable the Explore Wilsonville program to continue. First of all, just a quick review, the Tourism Promotion Committee is composed of 12 members. There's 7 voting members who are listed up here. We've recently had 2 vacant positions, David Stead from Langdon Farms and the former executive director of the World of Speed Museum. However, the committee has been doing pretty good work and they are seeking new recruits. We also have ex officio advisory members that include our tourism partners and the Wilsonville Chamber of Commerce, our Park and Rec department, as well as Councilor Lehan. City staff also help with the committee. Basically, in May of 2019, our current vendor, or at the time our current vendor, announced the dissolution of the firm just as we were ready to come to you to renew their contract for a year. So with your permission, we did a 6-month professional services agreement with Velocity Tourism, which was one of the partners of the firm that had dissolved. We advertised the RFP for tourism services during August and September. By the September 30th deadline, we received 8 proposals. The committee reviewed those in October and chose 4 finalists, interviewed the finalists on November, and one company stood out above the rest as the consensus choice with the highest score from the review. That company was called J-Ray. They demonstrated a keen understanding of Wilsonville's position in the shadow of a major market. They understand our regional tourism approach that seeks to position Wilsonville as the ideal overnight lodging location for day trips to area attractions. And they also emphasize a strategic focus to develop new packages of attractions and lodging that encourage visitation during the slower shoulder season months. Some of their current clients include the Olympic Peninsula, Experience Olympia, Visit Kent, Travel Tacoma, and City of Astoria Parks and Recreation. The contract includes a wide variety of marketing services, websites, social media, PR, photography, management, printing, distributing collateral, for a total of $300,000 over the course of a year and a half. The contract has 2 optional 1-year renewal provisions at $200,000 each. Currently, we have budgeted $200,000 a year for tourism promotion for the past several years and anticipate doing so into the future. As I noted, Wilsonville, the pocket trips emphasize day trips. There are different themed pocket trip itineraries designed to attract a wide range of audiences, from families to singles, to those who are interested in culture or history, outdoor recreation, etc. And we anticipate continuing the pocket trip emphasis, but our new firm will also look at various other promotional activities that can be taken up. That, in a nutshell, is the summary of Resolution 2776 that authorizes the professional service agreement for tourism services.
Thank you. Council, any questions of staff with regard to this proposal? Doesn't look like it. Council, what would you like to do with Resolution 2776?
Your Honor, I move that we approve resolution number 2776.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. We approve Resolution 2776. Discussion? Perspective?
Your Honor, as the liaison to this committee, I was there and heard most all of these presentations. And there were some excellent ones there. I would remind you that I am a liaison position, so I was not a voting person on this. But the rest of the committee was very enthusiastic about this particular group, and so there was it was unanimous in their selection. So I felt comfortable with it. But I wasn't a voter.
Thank you for that perspective. Anybody else? If not, we have a motion and a second. I'll ask for the council, all in favor of the motion to approve Resolution 2776, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, passes 4-0. Thank you much. Bring us to Resolution 2779.
I could read these two together, and then you could vote on them.
779 and 780?
Yeah, because
Okay.
same team. Okay, so we'll do that. Resolution number 2779, a resolution of the City of Wilsonville adopting Structural Specialty Code, Zero Energy Ready Commercial Code, Mechanical Specialty Code, Residential Specialty Code, Electrical Specialty Code, Plumbing Specialty Code, and Fire Code. And resolution number 2780 is a resolution of the City of Wilsonville approving building permit fee schedules, mechanical permit fee schedules, and plumbing permit fee schedules.
Thank you. So when we get to a voting, we probably should vote separately.
Yes.
Okay, but information from staff probably pertains to both, so welcome. Please go ahead.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the City Council. My name is Dan Carlson. I serve as the city's building official.
Amanda Guile-Hinman, Assistant City Attorney.
So tonight we're here to request that you approve Resolution 2779, adoption of the building codes, and adoption of fee schedule, which is Resolution 2780. And just by way of some brief background, we're here because the State Building Codes Division recently adopted the 2019 Oregon Structural Specialty Code. And with that, they advised jurisdictions that they were no longer covering 26 items in the scope of the code. And they have made available an option for jurisdictions to adopt 20 of those 26 items. So tonight we're here to, this as part of this resolution process, is to adopt 19 of those 20 items back into our local code. And as part of this presentation, let's move forward here. We're trying to divide this into what is staying the same versus what is changing.
So what's staying the same are the building fees that are outlined in Resolution 2780. Those aren't being touched there, so they're the same as what's being charged currently under our current code. The energy code, mechanical code, electrical code, plumbing code, and fire code are all staying the same. We're just straight adopting what the state codes are in those respects. For the residential specialty code, there's a couple minor changes that we are proposing today. So we're proposing that the council adopt the 2017 Oregon Residential Specialty Code. So that's what's currently in effect. But adding two elements. The first is construction safeguards relating to fire safety during construction. And those construction safeguards are consistent with what staff is proposing to be adopted with a local adoption of the structural specialty code. And then also Appendix Q of the 2018 International Residential Code. The state legislature in the last legislative session adopted House Bill 2423 that requires the state building codes division to include Appendix Q in its residential specialty code. And so as a local jurisdiction under that code, we are also required to adopt that. That Appendix Q is specifically related to tiny homes.
The next, moving into some of the more meaty changes involving our structural specialty code, our commercial code. We're adopting the 2019 Oregon Structural Specialty Code with several modifications or additions. I mentioned earlier, 19 of the 20 items in that list will be adopted. We are specifically excluding forced seismic rehabilitation of existing buildings because we already have excellent provisions in our codes for voluntary seismic rehabilitation. Of the 19 items, 20 of those do not need any additional regulations. The code already covers those. Those are items listed on your screen here, items like retaining walls, fences, tanks, telecom towers, flagpoles, floating structures, docks, fixed piers, equipment shelters, implementation and administration of our National Flood Insurance Program, and transitional housing, and then, of course, anything else that isn't in there, we're covering as well, so matters not encompassed. Other two big issues are dangerous buildings. We're proposing to adopt the Oregon Structural Specialty Code Section 116 and the 2018 International Property Maintenance Code provisions that provide us with some very specific definitions for what is a dangerous or unsafe structure. And then we have the second item is safety during construction. This item covers 3 to 6 of the list of 20 items, and it contains Chapter 33 of the Oregon Structural Specialty Code in adding provisions about tall wood structures, as Amanda mentioned earlier. So our residential code and our commercial code remain consistent with each other. We're also adopting several provisions relating to fire suppression, including hydrants, extinguishers, standpipe systems, fire department connections, that sort of thing. And to sort of close the gap here to end this, we're looking at encroachments in the public right-of-way, signs, and grading, as well as different topics that we'll be adopting. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have them. I think Amanda mentioned already that we are not proposing any fee changes whatsoever. We're just simply readopting those fees as they currently exist. And the reason for doing that is because we've completely reorganized Chapter 9, and so they need to find their own place now.
Okay, council, questions for staff? Councilor Lehan.
Since we have a brilliant city attorney, I just want to ask a technical question here on the motions. So C says this is a resolution adopting this code, and D is a resolution approving some fee schedules. And I always thought we were, approving resolutions and adopting ordinances, but we can approve an adoption. It seems a little confused. Do we that there was a difference between the language in adopting something or approving it, but or approving a fee schedule. And
But I understand what you're saying, because adopting usually does come in conjunction with ordinance. Right. But if we can also change the word if you feel more comfortable to say.
no, I just didn't.
No, it's a good thought, good question.
It just occurred to me. Oh, well. But if it makes never mind, I'll ignore it.
Other questions? A complex topic that staff has been learning about the last month or so, and staff has done a yeoman's job helping inform council about what the impact of all of these are. So I appreciate all the work that staff has put into this, including various discussions and looking at the legal question of what impacts would be of doing certain things or doing other things. So it's been a lot of work in a short time frame because this is the time frame that was presented by the state. And so I think that we're on the right path, and appreciate the fact that we're here instead of taking a stance that we don't know what to do, so we'll delay doing anything, which I don't think would be the wise way to go at this point. But there are lots of details within these proposed resolutions. So apparently everyone's got it down.
I'd just add one thing to Councilor Lehan's question. The other reason they use the word adopting here is we're adopting what the state has already put in place. We're not doing our own thing.
Oh, I see.
So that's what,
that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, if there are, I'm sorry, Councilor Linville.
Well, I just wanted to emphasize, it's my understanding that the reason that all of this work had to be done was because the state decided that it would no longer be the source of codes for a standardized code statewide. Is that correct?
That is partially correct.
Okay.
I'll just try to clarify that a little bit. The state is responsible to basically promulgate a statewide building code for every jurisdiction in Oregon, counties and cities alike, and state-run jurisdictions. And we've been under the statewide system since 1974. And basically, the state recently took a look at the enabling language, the statutory language of ORS 455-020, and met with their legal counsel, came up with an interpretation that is slightly different than what we've always understood it to be. And that interpretation impacted the scope of the statewide building code, so what it would encompass. Based on that, the state went through Chapter 1 of the state codes and removed those items from the scope that they felt no longer could be included in the body of the state code, but told jurisdictions you can adopt local provisions to cover these items that we're now removing from the scope of the code.
And it wasn't that those were no longer necessary.
Correct.
It's just that they were not going to be included in the state code. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that there was actually a very short notice time
Correct.
for jurisdictions to take and include those in their own codes.
That's correct.
And so you folks have been working feverishly to try and meet the deadline because, in essence, the end of the year is when we were supposed to have our code in place.
Yes.
And so that's kind of the reason that we're doing this at this point.
Right.
I would think a number of people would wonder, well, we already have a building code. We've had building codes for years and years and years. And why is the city doing this? This is a whole bunch of new codes. And in essence, it's not.
Correct.
But I think the one thing that is commendable is, given the recent fire in Villebois with the buildings that were under construction, that we've done some extra safety code that should help construction improve the safety of an access of buildings that are under construction. So I think that's a good thing, especially in this code.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'd like to add too that because this is sort of a new revelation for building officials in local jurisdictions, first off, that the State Building Codes Division has pulled back on amendments to the residential specialty code that it was originally proposing because of feedback from the Oregon Building Officials Association and other entities, but also that it's allowed for us, as to your point, to look at some other nuances that aren't even optional language in the structural specialty code, where we can make sure that we're protecting structures appropriately.
Mm-hmm. So, very good. Thank you.
Any other questions? I had one technical question I'd like to ask. The fire safety pieces, I may have missed as you went through that slide. You listed several different things about that. Was one of those a requirement for fencing around a construction site in that scenario?
No, we have added that to our local code, yes. We will have fencing now around construction sites that meet that definition in 3302. The state has stripped out the provisions like for fire extinguishers and standpipes and private fire service mains. And so we have added that back in, along with a technical standard, a pointer to an NFPA technical standard, which is a nationally recognized standard that we've been using actually all along anyway. So Councilor Linville really sort of articulated pretty well that we're very minimally expanding what we've previously had. If anything, we're keeping a lot of it the same and reinforcing what we've had with something I think it's even better, particularly around tall wood buildings under construction.
Yeah, but we did not previously have a fencing requirement for those structures, and now we are going to?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, any other questions? If not, council, what's your pleasure with regard to resolution 2779?
Your Honor, I move to approve resolution number 2779.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Moved and second, we approve resolution 2779. Any discussion?
I think we've covered it pretty well.
All right, if we've covered it pretty well, I'll ask for the vote. All in favor of the motion to approve Resolution 2779, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, passes 4-0. Council, what would you like to do with Resolution 2780?
Your Honor, I move to approve resolution number 2780.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Moved and second, we approve Resolution 2780. Discussion here?
Yeah, I guess, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't push my button.
Yeah.
Just to clarify, there are no changes in the fee. So this is adopting the fee schedules so that they are in line with the new chapter.
Correct.
Is that correct? Okay.
To additionally clarify, though, when we went through the last budget cycle, it was identified by the finance director and through that budgeting cycle that we needed to do a fee analysis in the coming fiscal year, or in that coming fiscal year. So that fee analysis is not done. It's probably 85% done. So you will see that in the next, probably in the next quarter, I'm guessing, so.
Okay. Anything else? I've lost track. We've got a motion and a second, right?
That's correct.
Okay. So if that's the case, council, all in favor of the motion to approve resolution 2780, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Passes 4-0. Thank you very much. That will bring us to a different item here, Resolution 2783.
Resolution number 2783, a resolution of the City of Wilsonville authorizing settlement and dismissal of Land Use Board of Appeals case number 2019-058. And I'm just going to stay on this side of the table to do the little report.
Yeah, go ahead.
But as you recall, back in June of this year, the City of Wilsonville filed an appeal with the Land Use Board of Appeals of a Washington County land use decision that authorized a contractor's establishment that was located outside of the City of Wilsonville city limits within Washington County, but it adjoined the city's Garden Acres Road. The city recently took over jurisdiction of that road and is in the process of doing major road improvements there, which include making the road wider than the road currently is, wider than the county road standards. At any rate, the hearings officer did not require the contractor's establishment that was being approved to dedicate any land in order to allow the road to be widened to the width it needed to be widened to. That's the primary reason that we filed the appeal. And since the appeal was filed, we've been working with both Washington County and the contractor's establishment, which is C&L Lang LLC and Jim Lang. And we've worked out the problem, and the contractor's establishment has agreed to dedicate the road to us along with the public utility easement. This particular contractor is also one of our subcontractors on the Garden Acres Road project. So it was important to work out something that was good for the city and also got rid of the appeal with the county. So it's taken a little bit longer than we had anticipated it would. The Washington County is still looking at the grading permit that the contractor's establishment needs. And so that's the last piece to be finalized, but the deed and the easement have been put into escrow, signed. And as soon as the grading permit is issued, then we will go ahead and dismiss the LUBA appeal and record the deeds. So this is just a resolution authorizing the city to dismiss the LUBA appeal and record the deeds simultaneously.
Okay, any questions for staff? If not, council, what's your pleasure on resolution 2783?
Your Honor, I move to approve resolution number 2783.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Moved and seconded that we approve resolution 2783. Discussion?
Excellent legal work.
That's true.
Thank you.
Anything else? If not, I'll ask for the vote. All in favor of the motion to approve Resolution 2783, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, passes 4-0. Thank you much. Next item, continuing business on Ordinance 839.
Ordinance number 839, second reading, an ordinance of the City of Wilsonville repealing and replacing Wilsonville Code Chapter 9 structures and declaring an emergency. And I would note for the record that, as you may recall, during first reading, we had some revisions to the code section that were just kind of walked on. And those revisions to the proposed code are the ones attached to the staff report in this packet. And we left the record open in order to give the public time, if anybody was interested, to comment on those revisions, because that's the actual version of the code that staff is asking you to adopt tonight. And my understanding is we've received no additional comments, even though the public record has been open. So if council has additional questions for staff, you can ask them now, or otherwise you can go ahead and close this and decide what you want to do.
Okay. Is there any further information that staff would like us to have before we make a decision on how to go forward?
No.
We haven't received any comments from the public either.
Okay. I guess formally I'll ask for a motion then to close the public hearing, if it pleases the council.
Your Honor, I move that we close the public hearing on ordinance number 839.
Thank you. Is there a
on its
second?
Second reading.
Second.
Moved and seconded that we close the public hearing. This is not the vote on the ordinance, just on the hearing. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Passes 4-0. The public hearing is closed. Council, what's your pleasure on ordinance 839 with regard to second reading?
Your Honor, I move to adopt ordinance number 839 on second reading.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? Another piece of the complicated discussion we just had with regard to 2779 and 2780. With all the work that has gone into this, second reading will call for a roll call. I will ask that to be done now.
Councillor Linville?
Aye.
Council President Ackerval?
Yes.
Councillor Lehan?
Yes.
Mayor Knapp?
Yes, passes 4-0 on second reading. Thank you one and all for your work on that.
Thank you, council.
Bringing us to city manager's business.
Congratulations.
Another year?
Your last meeting of the year. So if you've been to every meeting, you've spent over 110 hours in this lovely room right here. So well done. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year, and let's do it again in 2020. How's that sound?
Yeah, and Merry Christmas to you also.
Just as a reminder, you will be before the Citizens Academy in early January. So if you need any help with talking points, or if you want to know more about the process, reach out to me or Zoe. We'd be happy to help you. Councilor Lehan is going to be giving a brief history of Wilsonville at hers, so we all look forward to that. I think they will all like that. I've sat through the one she gave to the third graders. I believe it's the third graders, right? So hopefully she'll add a couple more elements to it. But
Second graders, but
second graders, okay.
that's okay.
Older every year.
Those dates are all on your city calendar, so.
All right, great. Anything legal business? Anything more legal business?
Yeah, I do have some legal business. First of all, thank you for renewing my contract. And then I have a Supreme Court case that came down today that we've talked about this subject at many council meetings. But the Supreme Court actually decided that it would not review the Ninth Circuit's decision in the Boise, Idaho case, where they said that it was cruel and unusual punishment to prevent homeless people from sleeping on public property on streets and sidewalks. So that case will stand. And ironically, at the end of November, the Salem City Council had an ordinance before it where they were planning to ban sleeping on sidewalks and streets. At the last minute, they rolled that back a little bit. Now they have an ordinance that pretty much precludes setting up campsites on the streets and sidewalks, but they took the part that said you couldn't sleep on the streets and sidewalks out. Portland tried to do the same thing a while ago, and their case was overturned, or their ordinance was overturned. So there's, even though Salem passed this, there's already threats of lawsuits to stop this ordinance from taking effect. So it'll be interesting to watch this one. Our city council wisely decided to direct us several months ago, even though we have a no camping and sleeping ordinance, to not enforce those provisions in light of the Boise, Idaho decision. So what we'll probably do now that the Supreme Court has decided that it's not going to reconsider that case, I think we'll go ahead and amend our code, even though we haven't been enforcing it, just to make it comply with what with what the law is basically saying now. So.
Okay.
Interesting case and
Things
decision.
continue to evolve.
Yeah. And so other than Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, that concludes my legal business.
All right, I think then that we will be done with council business for the year and call us adjourned at 9:25. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you.
Got done a little early.